Hi, folks. You are watching and listening to a very special edition of Open Bar. I'm Mike Morales here in sweltering Southern California. That young man out there is
Isaac Montes, founder of Sotol Casa, Medanos.
Yeah, you folks may have seen our reviews on Casa Medanos. I know that I believe Jason and I did those together, and Jason's our taster in Arizona, and we went bananas over that. I feed him a lot of stuff that's available, from up from northern Mexico to southern Arizona, because that area there, for some reason, as well as New Mexico, has been really a lot of fanatics about Sotol, and that's what we're talking about today. Sotol was very special to me because it was brought to my attention almost I want to say 15 years ago now, when I lived in New Mexico, and I met a first family through Republic National. The president of Republic National said, "You need to meet these people, this family." And I said, okay, all right. And at that point, Sotol had not been on our radar. We were still tasting and dissecting tequila and things like that. And maybe an occasional mezcal, but it wasn't where it is now, where the market is just, and that's where I met Jacobo Jaques, Jacob Jaques, and the Jaques family. And I've been a fan of Sotol ever since. And I think for the Southwest, for me, nothing defines it better than a good Sotol. There's tequila and there's mezcal, but Sotol really, and it's really interesting because Arizona itself has more of a history with Bacanora, which is also kind of an interesting history. How did you get involved in Casa Medanos, and why Sotol? Is it just because you're from the area there, or?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having us on your show. We really appreciate it. Thanks for the reviews. We always are very open to constructive criticism, from experts like yourself, so that we can continue.
I got nothing to say, man. This stuff is just good. Go get it, folks. If you've seen our review, you want to get yourself a few bottles.
Thank you.
Where are you available right now?
So we're only available in Texas, El Paso, Texas. Obviously, that's the city north of Juarez, Mexico, our home base. So obviously that's kind of our stronghold, and then we'll be available in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Obviously, you grew up, you lived in New Mexico, so you know exactly where that is.
Oh yeah.
So exactly what you were saying with Bacanora being geographically and culturally kind of the spirit for Arizona. As you well know, Sotol is probably going to be that for kind of the Southwest, because the cultural connection and all that good stuff. So how we got into it, and I'll tell you a little bit about my story, Michael. I don't know if this is how it works. I don't know. I must have been 14 years old. I don't know. I know this is a family-friendly show, but I remember someone.
It's not a family-friendly show. We're talking about alcohol. There's no families watching this. Maybe not supposed to.
I remember someone at some party or a family gathering whipping out a plastic bottle or a gallon. How that's how it used to be back in the days.
Yep.
And I remember tasting it, and the only thing I remember was thinking, this is not tequila. That's the only thing. I didn't know anything about spirits. I didn't know anything about Sotol, anything like that. I think if people tell you that Sotol has been part of Chihuahuan mainstream culture, they'd be lying to you, because it was very niche for sure, and kind of an outlaw spirit.
Yes.
So it wasn't easy to find. It wasn't like it was available in any liquor store or anything like that. But anyway, as time went on, I would take Sotol bottles to university parties when I was an undergrad student, and no one would drink it.
Why? Why not?
No one knew what it was, right?
Oh, okay.
And it was great for me because it was more Sotol for me.
Right.
The brand that was available back then commercially is obviously, as you well know, kind of the Coca-Cola of the Sotol industry. That you can find that in any liquor store. They export to practically every single country.
Yep.
That was the only thing that was available. and then kind
And
of finish.
even that is not a representation of what real Sotol tastes like, because that was my introduction. That had been the only thing I'd ever had, and I thought, hey, this isn't bad. Even their slogan is
Yeah.
similar. You know, if you love to, like tequila, you'll love Sotol, right? So that's their slogan.
So their philosophy is different, right? And even the master distiller that they have, we wouldn't call him a maestro sotolero. He's an enologo, so he was in the wine industry for a long time. So he's very used to working with yeast that work very well. So I think they use champagne yeast for Sotol, which obviously doesn't make any sense culturally, but that's my perspective. I'm never gonna speak ill of anyone else, but it just doesn't make that much sense if you want to think about it that way. Only if you're putting out an industrial product and you need to make sure that your processes and your protocols are very much in line, right? So that was the only thing that was available, and obviously, that's kind of what I continued to drink. And as my palate evolved, then you start to transition away from those industrial products, and then just kind of got into the Sotol industry. Well, didn't really get into the Sotol industry, just started to ask questions about what it was, because I really didn't know, and there was no information available 10 or 15 years ago, to be honest.
Yeah.
Just started to travel.
Even though there was a history
yes.
of Sotol making in like, I want to say Texas. I've got some history down here, but that was during the war, and then and of course during Prohibition as well. Every mobster made money in Prohibition anyway, so right.
Yeah, and there's a reason why people didn't drink Sotol in this part of the world for the longest time, right? The Mexican government, as you well know, and the state government, and we can talk about the history a little bit more, were very aggressive in killing and incarcerating Sotoleros. So it's only in 1994 that the ban is essentially lifted. And it's great for us because there's a new generation of not maestro sotoleros, but sotoleros that are brand owners. And we want to make sure that we, that famous quote, if I can see further is because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants.
Right.
And that's the truth. I mean, we want to make sure that the history and the traditions and the stories of the maestro sotoleros are well conserved and we're well told, because they deserve all of the praise.
I totally agree. There's a lot of controversy going on right now with Sotol and the word Sotol, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I'm just more fascinated with your background and how you're the importer or the curator of this line?
I am the brand owner.
Okay.
And we have an importer here in El Paso, Texas, or there, I should say, because I'm in Juarez.
Right.
And then we have a distributor for all of Texas and New Mexico. Very small batch boutique distributor, small batch boutique importer, because it goes with our philosophy of creating just incredible spirits at a small scale. Even though it's a very difficult game to play, we're just ultra committed on making sure we produce and put out incredible products.
Right now, the two that we've had, I think one is the I guess we would consider a reposado, and then the other one was a blanco, and the branding on it was switched a little bit, was changed, and it's actually really elegant. As simple as the labeling is, because it's just your basic bottle, but the I like the branding on it. It really gives it a nice elegant look, and honestly, what you were bringing in really is an elegant sipper, and that's the interesting thing for me. When I first had it, it was a night and day versus we'll mention the company. It's called Hacienda de Chihuahua. Okay, it's everybody. It's the Jose Cuervo of Sotol, and, and you're right. They are worldwide. They're global. Okay, they have that kind of reach, and that was the only thing that was available. Even in New Mexico at that time when I was living there, and I thought this is nothing. When I first tasted the Jaques family at the time was bringing in Don Cuco Sotol, and that was amazing. It was grassy. It was, everything we talk about tequila, the terroir and the highlands and the lowlands, which is now 15 years later, all of that is beginning to disappear from from the tequila industry. I like to say that tequila tasting is becoming a lost art because the flavor profiles are becoming more cookie cutter. You're getting these major transnational corporations giving these cookie cutter profiles, and they're telling you what to drink, and it's always sweet, and it has nothing to do with the real stuff, right?
Right.
So when I tasted my fruit, I've been a fan ever since, because for me, and I still miss New Mexico, and my goal was always to move back, but that really hasn't happened because life got in the way. But anyway, um, you know, to me, it was so much about the smell and the taste of the desert Southwest. I think nothing acquires that terroir. Nothing illustrates what terroir is like a Sotol does. And even from different states, now that I've been able to have them from not just Chihuahua, which is right now the majority of the brands are coming out of there, but Durango is another one. You know, that even the Sotol, the plant that grows in Texas, has a different flavor and aroma than some of the other ones. You know, just because of who's making it, where it's growing, how stressed the plant has been, you know, that kind of thing. So how do you find the people that make the Sotol for you? Because I know with one of those, I think you're using a vinata of the Hacienda family, or you're borrowing it, or it's a collab, I guess, what you're doing. How do you find these guys, these women?
Yes. So before we launched, we had a commitment to making sure that we could find out as much information as we could, talk to as many maestros sotoleros as we could, so that when we launched, we weren't, jumping, even though we've gone through a lot of obstacles, to make sure that we got the story right and the process right. And, weren't kind of backtracking. So Janos, which is 2.5 hours south, west of Juarez, is the first. Well, it's the second vinata we kind of visited.
Right.
Jacobo Jaques, or Jacob Jaques, and his family are incredible people. They took really good care of us. They're all about sharing the story, sharing the knowledge. And, even if in the future we don't continue to work with him on this project, I will always be grateful. And as a brand, they're incredible people, to be honest. I just can't speak, more highly of them. But anyway, the first maestro sotolero that we met was an 85-year-old Melquiades, Don Cali Alvarez. He's in Casas Grandes. It's very difficult to work with an 85-year-old with a history of the Mexican government persecuting you.
Oh,
so
yeah.
They're not very open to sharing knowledge, and because of, obviously the cultural baggage that they're carrying with them.
Sure.
So it was very difficult to work with him. But when we launched with his vinata, and then we transitioned over to Jacobo, who's, kind of more of my generation age-wise.
Right.
And we've worked very comfortably with him, and he shared a lot of information with him. But the product that we're importing to the United States, we're not working with the Jaques family. It's a different vinata in Cuauhtemoc, with the first maestra sotolera, at least recognized formally. I'm sure there's been many women in the Sotol industry throughout the centuries, but none that have been called maestras at this time.
Yeah, I know that, it's interesting you bring that up, because we hear about the history of the persecution of Sotoleros and of Bacanora, same story, pretty much.
Yeah.
But you're, or even mezcal in some places, because at one point everybody was being persecuted, and they're all up in the hills, and even the style of distillation that they're using is just to be able to pack it up quickly and move if you have to, because of the police, the Mexican police or whoever is coming to get you, and it never occurred to me that that those maestros, the ones making bacanora or even sotol would have, you know, after having been persecuted and lived through all that, right, would continue to carry that, you know, like you said, that cultural baggage. So it never occurred to me that that would be a thing, but it must be prevalent among, you know, among the older generation, if you could even find them. I mean, I don't even know how would you start to look for somebody that's been around that long to make a sotol for you to import.
Yeah, no, it's difficult. You kind of have to go to the town and kind of ask around, and it's not like they're standing at some corner, right?
Right.
It's like, hey, it could be an hour and a half in the mountains, and take a left here, take a right here, and good luck. Hopefully, you find them.
Wow.
They give you some number. Sometimes there's connection. If they have it up in the mountains, if they don't, then you know you kind of do your best. But yes, it's not easy to find them. And once you do find them, there is that you know, that obstacle. And then there's a humongous gap between that generation and the Jacobo generation, because there's not that many 60 or 50-year-old Sotoleros. So it's kind of a newer generation, the Jacobo, who's almost, you know, 40, I'm 40, and then kind of the 70s, 80s. So, you know, we want to make sure that we collaborate with as many younger maestros Sotoleros so that the tradition can carry on forever.
Yeah, I wonder why there is such a wide gap between, you know, between the maestros of the old guard, as I'll call them, and then the relatively younger. Why would you say that there's such a generational gap? That's like 30 years. That's 3 decades of, you know, of empty space.
Sure. I mean, there is a reason. I would say that the 70, 80-year-olds, they were working with their grandfathers and their dads. And then obviously an incredible persecution begins. So the sons and grandchildren of these people, they were like, hey, you know, go out and study and become a professional architect or lawyer, and don't be a Sotolero, because there's no future in this. And there really wasn't any future in that. So that's the reason that there's a humongous gap, because you know, that generation thought that for their families it would be best if, you know, if they went to university or college and did something else instead of making sotol.
Wow, that's amazing. So how is that, how you found the female maestra sotolera? You went into town one day and said, I'm looking for a female. I mean, I don't know. Were you looking for someone on purpose, or was that just happened? Was that just
so we were? She has a different story. The vinata that she works out of is someone that we've become very good friends. Carlos Corral, big saludo to him. Young Sotolero as well. So she had been working in the tequila industry for a couple of years, and she's actually from a tiny town outside of Chihuahua City called Anahuac, and so they hired her to make sotol, and she had she's an engineer, food engineer by university education or formal education. So that's the reason that the flavor profile of the Blanco that you tried is very clean and elegant, and there is no ups and downs when you're. I mean, it's just. I think she accomplishes what she's trying to put out there because of her formal education and the fantastic, you know, obviously education that she got in the tequila industry, of making sure that you follow, you know, all the appropriate protocols.
Yeah, she that Blanco was I remember it being, I thought it was so unusual because I had never had a sotol that had like a grapefruit or citrus overtones. Almost it in fact, I would say that was the majority of the flavor and aroma profile that we got.
Yes.
Versus the grassy, earthy that I was used to, you know,
Correct.
that I'm used to. That was more, you know, what was difficult for me was to trying to figure out where it came from, because I didn't think that happened naturally in a sotol plant. But so now I'm thinking, okay, well then that is probably because of the hand of the maker. So
yes.
do you know why she went that direction? Did she just want to do something different, or just let her go bananas and let her do her thing? Or
So the brand, yes and no, I guess is the correct answer. The brand that she puts out for several brands now. We're fortunate to be one of them. And we wanted to make sure that we were at a lower ABV than maybe what you're used to finding a lot of your Sotols,
right,
or at least your small batch Sotols, which is 45, 48, even above 50.
yeah.
And if you've never had Sotol and you're not a Mexican spirit enthusiast, and they give you a 55% Sotol, that might be your only interaction, and you are never going to go back to trying Sotol again. It would be very difficult.
Well, I don't know. Some of us fell in love with something a little higher, but I get that. So basically, the idea was to come to market as an entry level gateway kind of thing, but still with enough character. And that's what
Yes.
I loved about it, is that this is like really got enough character in it, but it's only at what was it, 40 or 42?
We're at 40.
Or 40, okay.
We're at 40, and we wanted to make sure that, yes, we were at a lower ABV, but it still had enough character to be used in the cocktail market, right? In the cocktail space.
Right.
Which is obviously not how I drink my Sotol, because it's a plant that takes a minimum 15 years to grow. So to have, take it in a shot or in a not very well made cocktail would be sort of a sin.
Yeah.
But that's kind of out of our hands, and we wanted to make sure that it was available to mixologists and bartenders, to be versatile enough for them to use it in their cocktails.
How is the acceptance been for Casa Medanos, for you?
Sure.
And in the cocktail? I mean, the cocktail culture is basically what's driving all the markets at this point.
Yeah.
So how has the acceptance been for you?
So yes, I mean, as I was saying, El Paso and Juarez are our home base, and we're out and about, talking to mixologists and chefs and sommeliers about kind of how to introduce Sotol to their consumers. So it's been somewhat easy to sell it in this part of the world because we're from here. But as we continue to expand, I think that's where the challenge is going to be, to markets that have never had Sotol and maybe are not used to working with these types of products.
How's the acceptance in Arizona been for you? I know that the reason I ask is Jason is Jason is a former sous chef, but he's also, bar manager, mixologist, and he just went nuts with that stuff, and he loved it. I mean, we loved it. So I would imagine that Arizona, though there are some places there now that are cocktail lounges and restaurants that are becoming more and more known for their variety of their drinks menus. So that's why I'm asking, because I think it'd be a really good market. But you tell me.
So sure. We're currently in negotiations or in talks to distribute all through Arizona. We don't want to say the distributor yet, so in case it doesn't go through, we don't look like fools. But it's someone that has a mezcal from a Oaxacan family, and he currently distributes, a small boutique portfolio of Mexican spirits, and it kind of goes in line with our philosophy. Okay. We don't want to work with a humongous distributor where we're just some product in some warehouse, in some box, and no one ever talks about Casa Medanos, right? And that's always the challenge.
How did you come up with the name?
So the Medanos de Samalayuca are some sand dunes. Medanos is a synonym of sand dunes.
Right.
If you've ever seen the movie Dune, the original one, or Conan the Barbarian, it was filmed at the Medanos of Samalayuca. So it's a very impressive natural treasure that we have in this part of the world. It's only 45 minutes south of Juarez, of the city, and that's kind of our spiritual home. Mm-hmm. We're currently talking about how to take a small tasting room there, and that's essentially our spiritual home.
Oh, that would be nice. Kind of like what Marfa has become. Marfa, Texas has become kind of a little hotbed for they've got their Agave Fest every year.
Yes.
In Marfa, right? Have you done that particular show?
This was the first year that we were at, and we had an incredible turnout and people that had never had Sotol, so it was great. We sold out of the boxes that we took, which weren't a lot. Excellent. But we love talking to people about what Sotol is and how it's different than agave based, and we're never gonna, sometimes people are like, well, I've had kind of transition out of tequila because it's become very industrialized. And it's like, well, you have to kind of understand market dynamics as well. This year, tequila is going to be the largest spirit consumed on the entire planet. So, I mean, however it is that you feel about that, that's a lot of stress on the tequila industry, right? They have to make
Well, it's a lot of stress on the plant,
on the farmers,
right?
on the land, on consumers as well, because sometimes it's a race to the bottom. Like, hey, I'm $1 cheaper. Oh, now I can be $2 cheaper.
Yeah, I know.
And then you're in a game of finding a celebrity to put them all over your cardboard and your publicity and all that. But they are a completely different category. I don't think that they count because they're at the top with the big boys, especially in investment, marketing, etc. So yes, we were at the Agave Fest this year, and we had a great turnout. We're talking about rattlesnake salt and how it goes with Sotol, because there's nothing worse than getting Sotol with a slice of orange and worm salt. Because even though we love that for mezcal from Oaxaca, that's not a Sotol thing. So there is still a lot of evangelization to do to talk to people what Sotol is and kind of the flavor profile and what we hope to accomplish with our product.
See, and I'm glad I'm talking to you because there's just a couple of things that I never knew. I mean, there's still some. I'm sure there's still some elements of the Sotol culture that is still closeted. That hasn't been revealed. I know that we had in one of our tastings, myself and Eric Zandona, who is our taster in Arizona, we had a chance to have a Sotol con víbora.
Nice.
And I had heard from Jacob and other people that that's supposed to be like medicinal, that stuff cures cancer and whatever stories you hear about it. And I was so jazzed when we finally got our little sample. It was like yay big, and it was being imported by another person that he and I both know, and we tasted it, and it was so different. It was like soup, it was like chicken soup. It was like a pechuga. There are certain similarities that I could focus on, that I could relay to the audience, because people may never ever taste that. They may walk into a bar and see the rattlesnake actually in the jar, and that sometimes that's for show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when you looked at the bottle and you shook it, you could tell that it had not been filtered out. That there were still particles of, I would imagine that's rattlesnake skin or whatever, that gave it its color and also its flavor. But the flavor was so good. Any plans of bringing something like that? Because I know it's so unusual, but it's really good, folks. It can be, in my opinion, it could be the version of a pechuga that you would get, or one of those. There are other bacanoras that are infused with fruit that are very celebratory and happen. They only make them like once or twice a year. You know what I mean? It's only for small batch. You have any plans for something like that? Do you know anybody who can make that for you?
Yes. We're actually gonna take or put out something at the end of the year for our market here in this part of the world. So you are correct. There's two different products with the rattlesnake, and they're different. One's the curado de víbora, where you drop the rattlesnake inside the container, and then unfortunately drown it in Sotol. So as it's fighting to stay alive, it's releasing the venom and a lot of the hormones into the Sotol itself. And then there is just Sotol with rattlesnake venom. So that's a different product.
See, that's also, and again, I didn't know that. All I know is what I read on the label.
Sure.
And what I had been told, but I'd never had any. So that was all I could say. Was very savory. It was very much like a pechuga or like a soup. Tastes like chicken, folks. It tastes like chicken. But it's not. You could tell there's a little bit. There's something different and unusual in it. We tasted it. We loved it. I wrapped it up. I put it in storage because I'll probably never see one again unless you're nice enough to throw us a couple of our way. Absolutely. Because I would love to know more about that culture.
Sure.
So you say you don't use worm salt. You use what kind of
rattlesnake salt? And the reason being is when you're
does that even exist? Who makes that?
Well, we make
homemade?
it. Yeah, we make it in the vinata, and then we have a chef that kind of puts a little twist on it to make sure it's it's nice and enjoyable for the American consumers.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's not easy to find. So the rattlesnakes, as you well know, in the winter go underground.
Yeah.
So once the summer comes around or spring, you have a very short window, and we always want to be conscious as well of making sure it's nice and sustainable, and not just going out there and killing as many rattlesnakes as possible.
Yeah.
Which is sometimes a challenge, right? When you're out there hunting for the plants because it's a wild harvest and it's not, cultivation. The rattlesnakes are there, so everything in the desert is a food source. So we grab the people that are out there with us, grab the snake, obviously kill it, and then sun dry it, and then you can grind it up and use it as salt in your soups or in your cooking. That's how I do it in our home. We don't have sea salt; we use just rattlesnake salt.
I
But
gotta
yes,
get a
that's
sample of rattlesnake salt. I
oh
do.
we'll send it to you.
I love this. This is, see, just when you think you know everything, and I don't know everything. I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you, even when I do tastings with my other tasters, I always learn from them, even
Sure.
though we've been doing this for 23 years. So I love this. This is stuff that I have not had been exposed to. Jacob and I, we communicate very often, but it's usually about the industry, and I've been out. I haven't seen him in a few years, and I've been away from New Mexico for a while. And it's life happens in between the 15 years that we've known each other. And he's gotten married. His sister has gone off and started her own life, and the families, unfortunately, Don Celso had passed away, that kind of thing. But so and the little bits of history that I know of are more as far as what happened during World War II, and how there was a Sotol, kind of a small Sotol industry in Texas, and it was more to create alcohol during World War II because there was a shortage of that. So I have some historical documentation, copies is what I have,
Sure.
that was supplied to me by the family, because I think one of Jacob's brothers is kind of a historian. But there's so much more that I don't know, that I would love to, because now I understand that with the rattlesnake salt, why you would take and talk to chefs in particular about how to introduce something that's got a different savoriness, a different flavor, and how to introduce it in the dishes, or how it's done generally in the state of Chihuahua or in that area where you're at. So I'm fascinated by this. I had no idea that there was so much depth in the history, because I've not been up in the hills like you. I mean, so how did you hear about your female master distiller? Was that just word of mouth that somebody said you got to talk to her?
So we met the Vinata owner, Carlos Corral, the good friend I was telling you about.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just met, obviously I knew that he wasn't distilling. He's more of the Vinata owner and the owner of the brand.
Right.
And, I was like, hey, can I meet your maestro? And he was like, no, actually it's a female. And she's like 26 years old. And I was like,
wow.
What? And I was like, hey, can we do a small tasting and kind of see what she's doing? And she's doing all kinds of crazy stuff, experiments, reposados, añejos, cannabis, rattlesnake venom. So in that part of the world, they grow a lot of apples. They're very famous for their apples. And she does an apple liqueur with Sotol, and just does a whole bunch of crazy stuff.
Where are you bringing all that stuff, man? Don't tell me about it. Bring it to me. Show me.
Hopefully very soon.
Delicious.
You'd have to come. We come to El Paso, fly to El Paso, jump in the truck with me. We can drive.
I need a trip to El Paso again. I drove past it. You always drive past El Paso and southern New Mexico on the way back to California, right? It's always the whistle stop. And I love El Paso. I like it. When I lived in New Mexico, there was a couple of times we vacationed in El Paso, just because it's very metropolitan. I tell people, and I interviewed another young lady earlier this year who's from El Paso. I think her brother actually imports tequila. And I said to her, people mistake El Paso, but of this small little. It's very cosmopolitan. It's like a small. The freeway system reminds me of L.A. Kind of on a smaller scale, and yet you can drive right through it and go past it. But there's shopping. They have a racetrack. We did a couple of went to the racetrack a couple of times. They used to have great shopping at the malls. Of course, that was before all of this other stuff happens. In between
Right.
life.
Sure.
What I wanted to find out from you is how when you introduce Sotol to people, what do you say to them? Like what happened at Marfa? I know you had some people saying they were moving away from tequila, but suppose you're just trying to get it past the lips. What do you tell people what this is? I mean, how do you describe it? What's that challenge that you to get it past the lips?
Sure. So it depends on the consumer that we're talking to, of course, right? So one of the reasons that we have invested a lot in my partner and myself. She happens to be my wife, so she takes most of the profits.
Wow, of course, don't they
but
all?
we wanted to make sure that we had a formal education on wine and spirits. So we became both certified sommeliers by the Escuela Española de Sommeliers, Mexico. And then, I transitioned into sort of the WSET level 1 and 2 in spirits, because I wanted to make sure that when I was talking to my audience, it was an appropriate language depending on the person that I was talking to, right? So I'm going to talk
if they're coming from the wine industry, then you know how to relate.
Yes.
How to relate the benefits from Sotol to wine, that kind of thing.
But yes, you are correct. And but if it's someone that has never had it, I kind of tell them the story really quick, as quickly as possible. And then a term that you'll hear it's going to be thrown around quite a bit in the Sotol industry is the famous petrichor, right? Petrichor. And that sort of kind of defines Sotol at its core. It's essentially when the water hits the ground, the aromas that come out, so everyone essentially in the Southwest is going to know what that smell is.
Yeah, it did. And that's exactly how I didn't know there was an actual word for it, because what I would tell people is if you lived in the Southwest, for example, right now, this is monsoon season, right? So I remember in New Mexico, you could smell rain when it was a hot day. You could smell it before it hits the ground, and sometimes the cell that because it rains in cells in New Mexico. It doesn't rain like it does in Southern California, where you have an extreme cloud cover and everything rains. It drops in cells, and you can smell it like a mile away. And if it's too hot and doesn't land on the ground, it creates wind. It creates what they call virga, and so then that brings that aroma. And I even tell people, rain off a sidewalk of cement, wet cement, is different from rain off a pavement versus rain off wet earth.
Sure.
And to know those differences is to love the characteristics of Sotol, because that, to me, that sealed it for me, because I love that kind of weather. To be able to smell the earth and the ground, whether it's a pavement or whatever. But you said, what's the word again?
It's called petrichor. Petrichor in English, and then in Spanish.
I learned something completely new today. I had no idea there was a word for it, but that's exactly what I'm describing.
Yes.
Sometimes when we do tastings of tequila made with a taona, you'll taste, or even mezcal, you'll taste that wet cement. And somebody says, well, what's wet cement like? Like I did a tasting of mezcal for 3 ladies not too long ago. And when I said some of the Sotol, some of the mezcals that we were tasting would have that smell of wet cement. And she said, well, what is that smell? And I said, well, and she was from the Midwest, from Chicago, from the city. So, rain in the city smells completely different than rain in the country, right? Or rain on grass, for instance, the wet grass or even a wet dog smells different, when it gets wet. And so I said, well, on a hot day, if you water down your garage and you have a cement floor in your garage and it starts to evaporate, that's wet cement. And then, if if you throw water on a hot, a driveway, a hot blacktop, or on the road, it smells different than it
Yes, it
would
does.
on the sidewalk. And
Hmm.
so she goes, "Oh, I get it now." Again, it was about relating where they came from to what you're trying to get them to discern.
Hmm.
And so I get that was that would be the challenge. You're right. That would be the extreme challenge. And so what happens now? You explained it to them very quickly, and then you get it past their lips, and then what happens?
Yes. So, and then we talk about, the main difference would be being that the plant is not an agave. So you kind of need to get that out of your mind if you're looking for the agave flavor profile, because obviously we all know that mezcal has completely become super popular in the entire planet. Then Bacanora, Raicilla now are up and coming Mexican spirits. So if you're pursuing that flavor profile, agave heavy, that as soon as you taste it, you'll be like, this really is not agave.
Yeah,
Even if you didn't know that much about agave
right.
and they gave you an agave base and Sotol, you would pick it up immediately. So just kind of start off with the main difference, which is that the plant is not an agave based, or I'm sorry, that the spirit is not agave based, and it's more in the ajo, the garlic, and the asparagus family, that it isn't the agave spirit. So you'll get a lot of vegetable notes in Sotol for sure.
Yes. Now, I know that at one point, well, if you look at the major producer of Sotol, they have on their list, on their label, that they are, or I guess they're USDA certified organic, and they're
Sure.
calling it agave say,
Yes,
which is incorrect.
it's incorrect. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
So it's in,
I don't know why they continue labeling it that way, and why they're
um,
allowed to label it like that.
so I haven't had I don't know the owner personally. It's a big time family from Chihuahua,
Right.
super wealthy, and they
Very
were in
politically connected, from
very
what I understand.
so I don't want to say something that then
No, of course
like
not. We don't
what
want. Yeah, we
happened
don't want
to
them
we don't,
knocking on your door. Yeah, I get it. I get it. But I can
what
say stuff like that. Like, that's incorrect, dude.
what happened to Isaac? He disappeared after the Tequila Aficionado interview.
Yeah.
Uh,
No,
so
no.
they were exporting.
Well, I could sell that interview. Watch Isaac's last interview with Tequila Fiction.
Yeah, yeah. So
No,
they were
no, God
exporting
forbid.
all before the DO was available legally.
Yes,
So if they probably put out, on their labeling that before the DO was, and then they just probably said, it's very difficult to sell Sotol, or at least it was in the early 2000s and
right.
kind of, last decade. And it was just an easier entry level conversation, I think, for consumers. If they were like, oh, it's just another agave based product. So
Right.
I think that that's the reason that they probably did it. I don't want to speak for them because I don't know them, but I'm assuming that that's the reason. And as the council, it's a very small council,
Yes.
regulating council. And I'll talk about it briefly if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
we're very new and unorganized, as it tends the case to be when you're starting out. So when the council starts to regulate and certify production or batches of Sotol, even then, for being such a powerful family, they'll have to change the labeling. Is my assumption.
Yeah, I would hope so. Just for transparency's sake, because I know it's important now more than ever,
Yeah.
with all the buzz going around in tequila about additives and things like that. I will say that their rustical line, I don't know if they're still producing it or not, but when I was still living in New Mexico, and I was at a tasting for mezcal, and somebody recognized me, which is really odd. That was scary. And he says, I represent, Hacienda, but I want you to taste this particular line. It's brand new.
Sure.
And supposedly the guy that introduced me to it said, I asked so-and-so to make this for us, to make it, because and it was way more what I remember Sotol being.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the rustical line. It was so good. It was completely night and day from their core line.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, why don't they keep making it like this? And I don't know if they have or not. This was a while back, and they haven't really pushed the rustical line like
Sure.
I would hope that they had, because obviously they make a ton of money and a living with their core line, as well they should. But really, that rustico line to me was rustico. I'm sorry, I keep pronouncing it in English. but I liked it way better, and it was more characteristic of what Sotol should be. Are there any plans for you of finding Sotoleros in the other two states?
And Durango and Coahuila, which are
Uh-huh.
the other two states that have the DO. So it's been challenging, but it's been very good for us to see. There's Sotoleros from Durango and Coahuila now wanting to incorporate themselves into the council, or have incorporated themselves into the council as of late. So I'm going to start meeting more Durango Sotoleros and Coahuila Sotoleros now that I have access to them. Durango is unique in the sense that they're the only state in Mexico that has the DO for both mezcal and sotol.
Right.
And as mezcal continues to explode around the planet, I can't imagine that people in Durango focus on a tiny industry like the sotol industry versus something that's easier to sell like the mezcal industry.
Yeah.
So yeah, my hope is to meet all of our friends in Durango and Coahuila in the sotol industries. Coahuila also has the challenge that it's a big time wine producer. So
Right.
Casa Madero, which is the
Yes.
oldest vinícola, the oldest, I guess, vines in the entire Americas.
Wow, no kidding. Okay.
So, a lot of the focus, at least on the economic and powerful interests of the states, are focused towards continuing to grow their wine production. And I can't imagine that they're very focused in Sotol. That's more of a Chihuahua thing for sure.
Yeah, well, that's where the majority of it. It's kind of like the tequila industry. The majority of the distilleries are in Jalisco, even
Sure.
though you can grow agave and make tequila in the other 4 or 5 different states.
Yeah.
Which they're going to have to, I think, expand if they want to
absolutely.
survive.
They will have
should.
to.
They'll
Sure.
have to. Otherwise,
They'll
they're
have
going to implode. And there's like the country of Australia is sitting there waiting to swoop in because they've got a huge blue agave industry that's burgeoning right now, and I can't wait to. Hopefully I'm on that short list to get samples when they're ready to roll out into the exportation. I want to discuss with you the controversy. I was kind of holding off on that because I know, and I would like to get your perspective on it. Right now, folks, there's a controversy about Texas Sotol. You may have seen it. I've written 1 or 2 articles on the cultural appropriation of Sotol by a certain business, a certain distiller based in Texas. And when you read their copy, the way they describe the history, they conveniently whitewash the existence of the indigenous influence that actually brought Sotol to that area. And what a lot of people are not aware, that the border system has crossed these people. They did not cross the border. And when you, I was fortunate enough to write a book in the last couple of years called Agave Spirits Around the World. And in doing the research on that, I realized how the border system of the United States had crossed these people. Because I mean, there was a time where Mexico was the owner of most of the southwestern United States. When you look at that map versus what it looks like now, and even portions of northern Mexico and southern New Mexico and southern Arizona, you look at those in South Texas as well, and you see where the border just kind of, crossed them, where these people were always, there were no such things as borders. I mean, basically that's the way it is. So anyway, this particular distiller is avoiding that portion of the history and going on and producing what they call Texas Sotol. And it's made with another variety of Sotol. Sotol, we call it, is not only the drink, but the plant. Although I have heard it called sereke, I think. And I know that from what I have had uh, Texanum. I have had Leophyllum. I hope I'm not even sure I'm
Sure.
pronouncing those right because those are the genus words names for them. And Cedrosum, I believe, is the other one.
And
Those are
then
the three.
Wheelery, if you had it with
Wheelery, of
Jacob.
course,
Yeah,
is the
that's
one.
the
Yes,
yes,
that's the one most of us have had
correct.
that can be found everywhere. So what's your take on that? Because I'll tell you what I've heard, but you tell me what I want to see your point of view. I want to hear that first.
Sure, sure. It's not an easy question, right? It's a kind of a layered question. It's complex, and we kind of had to start at the beginning. The indigenous population, at least in Chihuahua, the Raramuris, which call it Sereque, have been fermenting the plant for at least 1,000 years, maybe more.
Yeah.
There's been ovens, hornos de cocción underground, where they obviously knew that they could cook it and then ferment it. And they were drinking that at least 1,000 years ago. Obviously, the Spanish make it into the Americas, and then we can get into philosophical conversations as to if people were distilling before or not. But anyway, that's what is mostly accepted, that the Spanish brought distillation over with them. So Sotol, at least from the ones the Spanish have been here, has been drunk in this part of the world since the Spanish, made it
Right.
into the Nueva España, right? And then there's a cultural connection as part of our DNA because, as I was telling you, the Mexican Revolution kicks in 1910. Prior to the Mexican Revolution, Sotol was very popular in the state of Chihuahua. Pancho Villa, who is kind of this anti-hero or villain or hero, if you want to think about it that way, actually hated Sotoleros. He killed a lot of Sotoleros because he didn't drink. He thought it was bad for his troops and that it was an evil. And then Prohibition kicks in, and then the Chicago Mafia, led by Al Capone, makes it to Juarez, convinces wealthy Mexicans to kind of embark on this crusade to consider Sotol a spirit of bad quality and kind of for the peasants is how they worded it. And they tried to kill off as many of Sotoleros as they could to try and bring up the whiskey industry. There's a famous whiskey, straight American whiskey from Juarez. I don't know if you've had it. But anyway, Juarez whiskey essentially created the bourbon industry as we know it today in the United States.
Wow. Okay.
That's essentially what was being drunk in the United States, whiskey made in Juarez. And then obviously they create their own industry with the bourbon industry.
Right.
And then it continues to be illegal because of a President Plutarco Elias Calles, who was actually the governor of Sonora and made Bacanora illegal.
Right.
And then he makes it into the Mexican presidency and considers there's all these conspiracy theories about how if the tequileros, put him, were part of that industry that kind of helped them, ascend to power. And then they had to galvanize around one spirit in the country. The world was different before. Right. And then, obviously that's why they made Sotol illegal. But anyway, Sotol becomes illegal. The ban is lifted in 1994. The DO takes place in 2002. So it's part of our DNA culturally. And, I've met these people that you're talking about. There's a distillery industrial in, what's that city outside of Austin? I don't remember what it's called. Driftwood. I think it's Driftwood.
I think you're right. Driftwood.
Dripping Spring. Oh, no, I think that's, anyway, they treated me very well. I'll be honest with you, Mike, and I'm not going to, come here and bash them about it. But if you really get technical and historical about it, at least I haven't seen any documents of people distilling Sotol as they claim on the Texas side, where the indigenous communities before the border crossed them fermenting the plant. Of course they were. On the US, on the New Mexico side, on the Arizona side.
Right.
And then obviously as we went to Marfa to the Agave Fest, we were fortunate enough to meet some of the founders of the Marfa Spirits Company.
Right.
And they treated us really well at the distillery as well. So it's challenging for us on the Sotol industry because on the US side, it's very easy to get capital and knowledge on to how to distill as fast as you can so that it becomes a volume. So it's kind of unfair for us, small batch on our side, because we don't have access to a lot of the things that they have. But what the Marfa Spirits Company has done that we really liked is they put out a product that says Far West Desert Spirits.
Right.
That is kind of their new line. And I want to see that name kind of being placed on the label instead of Texas Sotol, to be honest.
No, I agree with you. Here's the kicker though. The TTB, the Tax and Trade Bureau, where every spirit, not just agave spirits, but every spirit that's imported into the United States has to follow certain applications and rules for tax purposes through this government agency before you even get your label, okay? And the label is considered, I think the short word for it is cola. So you get your cola or cola, and then you're able to import into the United States because you meet all of the qualifications to place on your label what you're bringing in. So in the last couple of years, they have rewritten their ground rules where they have created a segment called Agave Spirits. That is now, and underneath that umbrella, there is tequila and mezcal. For some reason, prior to renegotiating the last NAFTA, I forget now what they're calling it, but what was NAFTA was renegotiated during the previous administration, and they're calling it something else. And for some reason, at the last minute, getting the approval of the Sotol industry was dropped. So the only thing that was renegotiated was the recognition of the United States for tequila and mezcal. They were going to recognize Sotol, but that did not happen almost at the 11th hour. So I'm not sure what that is, but regardless, now in the United States, as well as in other Mexican states, they are able to bring in agave spirits, Mexican distillates under the agave spirits umbrella. So in other words, those Mexican distillates, for instance, that are outside their own denomination of origin, and the one word that I'll use is palmilla. That is a version of Sotol that is distilled outside of the denomination of origin of the other three states. And I've had it. I have samples of it. And it's really also very different, very gamey, in my opinion.
Yes.
But that can come in now, instead of calling it Sotol or whatever, it comes in under the umbrella of agave spirits. However, on the American side, there are micro distillers. One that we've tasted that was superb, coming out of Ohio, micro distiller in Ohio, who is importing concentrated blue agave. For lack of a better word, I'm not going to call it a syrup. It's just a concentrated blue agave something or other. Okay, and this is coming from a company that makes this. They are multi-certified company based in Jalisco that only produces or processes blue agave.
Okay,
and they do it for big pharma. They do it for the food industry. And it's multi-certified. It's organic. It's halal. It's gluten-free. Okay, and so these people make it a blue agave concentrate, and they make it for micro distillers in the United States. So they ship it to these people, and then they can distill it. They can ferment it and distill it in their style, and make what they call a blue agave spirit. So it won't be uncommon for the blue agave spirit in the United States to be on the same shelf as Sotol or Texas Sotol. The thing is that the TTB requires, when you do the labeling, it requires for the label to say distilled from Sotol. That's it. It's got to be on the label. And a lot of the controversy on the Mexican side is that, well, you can't have that word there.
Yes.
Yeah, I get it, but it's going to take another act of Congress to get the
Mhm.
TTB to switch that. And then what do so in the meantime, you're trying to figure out what to call this. Do we call it Texas Sotol? I like the desert spirit. I like that. I like that a lot.
Me too.
I even said, well, can we call it something like Texas Sereke or something, or just this is a wheelery, this is a cedrosum, this is a whatever.
Sure.
So it's difficult because the only way that the Sotol can get into the United States under the TTB rules is to actually have distilled from Sotol on the label.
Right.
Gotta have it, or you
Sure.
can't get in. So now it becomes a catch-22. Who do you side with when everybody wants to come to the United States? It's 80% of what of the tequila produced out of Jalisco, out of those states, comes into the U.S. We all know
Sure.
that, and
Sure.
and all the other distillates want to borrow those benefits. They want to be, as you said, they want to stand on the shoulders of the giants, and maybe ride on the coattails or on the wave of this wave of agave spirit.
Sure.
So who do you side with? I mean, this is almost like a non-issue. Can you explain that to the Sotoleros who are going that's against our denomination of origin?
Sure. So yeah. I think what you're saying is that they're exporting raw blue agave syrup, and then they're fermenting and then
It's not
distilling.
syrup. It's actually a concentrate, because the
Oh,
syrup
it's
is
a
something
concept.
else.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're actually just it's like this goo, this mash,
Okay.
and it's I have pictures of it that were sent to me. And the way they explain it, it really is, they manufacture blue
Okay.
agave concentrate
Got,
specifically for these micro distillers, and it
gotcha.
is thicker than agave syrup. It's not jarabe. It's
Okay.
not, it's not agave syrup, which they that plant, that facility in Jalisco also makes. Like I
Mhm.
say, they have a lot of big customers.
Sure.
They produce inulin for the big pharma. They
Oh, I
produce,
see.
what I
Okay.
mean? That's
Yes.
and then they produce this because it's almost like a tertiary business. It's like, okay, well, the micro distillers in the U.S. want some of this, but they're going
Yeah.
to pay for it because it's not
Sure.
as cheap as agave syrup. And a
Almost
lot,
like molasses in the rum
yeah,
industry,
kind of
right?
like molasses,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Because it's a lot thicker. And then they can ferment it and distill it in their style and age it in their
Sure.
barrels that they normally make their bourbons
Gotcha.
and their whiskeys. And
Gotcha.
so it's
Gotcha.
got their stamp on it. But
So my concern is that, if the Texas Sotol industry, as you well stated, when they renegotiated the God, what is it? The TMEC, I think that's the official term.
yeah,
Tequila, mezcal, and I want to say Bacanora was included, and then Sotol was excluded. So my concern is that if the Texas Sotol industry becomes really large, and then people in New Mexico will be like, hey, well, let's put out a New Mexico Sotol. And then in Arizona, an Arizona Sotol, because the plant also grows there.
yeah,
A California Sotol, because it also grows there.
it does. It grows there. I know. I've
So
seen it.
if that, you probably have it in your backyard.
Yeah.
So if that happens, they will cannibalize really small batch brands like myself, which we won't have access to the market as we have it now, because they're going to be making in the US, and it's going to be easier for them to distribute it faster. By the time we put out small batch quality products, it's going to take us months to make it to that shelf. So in that sense, it's going to be somewhat unfair if you want to think about it that way. So that's the reason that I would like to see the Far West Desert Spirit or a Central Texas Spirit label instead of Sotol on the label, to be honest.
I like that. I like that idea. Now, on the flip side, there is the producers, maybe the younger Sotoleros who are doing collabs, and what they see is that this is the calling it that will actually help the small producers, because they'll start to commercialize it. They'll dumb it down to 80 proof, 40 ABV. They'll start putting additives in it. They will eventually adulterate itself, those Texas based industries, because I know that some places are beginning to grow the Sotol commercially, which is not hasn't been culturally hasn't been done until recently.
Mhm.
So that's also in its infancy. You know, that's still going to take a while for those plants to grow in order to gain enough characteristics to make any kind of decent sotol. So, you know, I see both ends of this argument because I see where, yeah, I mean, even in the tequila industry right now, people who are sick and tired of the cookie cutter flavor profiles, they're seeking the tried and true families who have always made tequila,
Sure.
you know, and they're paying extra for it too. They're paying more for that quality, and they're not afraid to do it. I can name, you know, the Fortaleza, the Orandines, you know, all,
G4, right?
yeah,
Which I love. Yeah.
every camarena, you know, all
Yeah.
three branches of the camarena
Yeah.
family. You know, you could be very happy just supporting all three of the camarena families. You know, so and there's probably more too that I don't know anything about. But you know, so I see both ends of that argument because there is a rumor that at one point, whether that's going to happen or not, uh, a famous rock and roll star is wanting to bring Sotol into the market. You know, there's another one that we tried, Quechol, which I like. They make two separate styles, one a Wheelery and the other one a Texanum. I was not aware that Texanum doesn't just grow in Texas; it also grows in Durango.
Yeah.
So you know, these varieties of these plants pretty much grow everywhere, and it takes a botanist to figure out which is
Sure.
which. You know,
Yeah, it's true.
or Sotolero, who knows? Oh, that one over there is a, you know, whatever. And so, you know, I see both ends of that argument. I do. I think that because of the, you know, it's like commercialized whiskey. You know, everybody's got Jack Daniels, Jim Beam, all those big names. You know, anything under the Brown Foreman owns. You know, and then there's going to be these tried and true Sotoleros who people will seek out. So I get it, but we're looking at 20 years down the road, maybe sooner. I don't know.
Sure. So that Sotol that you're talking about is already on the market by that famous rock and roll star. So I think you're starting to see a lot of celebrities skip mezcal because it's becoming a saturated space and enter the smaller Mexican spirit
What
industry.
what's it called? I don't even I want to
Noche
know.
Luna. It's called Noche Luna.
Noche
And they,
Luna. I was
they have
not
a
aware that it was on the market.
they have a beautiful bottle. I saw it at I think Total Wine a couple of weeks ago. But anyway, for those brands and tequila it happens too, and mezcal too. For us, very small batch producers, it's challenging, right? Because all of a sudden a celebrity endorses your product, and that thing, all of the reflectors, and we're not bashing the product. I haven't tried it, so you know I could only bash it if I've tried it, of
Right,
course.
right.
But there's also the argument: is that going to be good for the Sotol industry? The fact that he can place it all over the entire United States because of his large following, or is it bad because he has zero cultural connection to Sotol and it's just something that someone brought to him, like, hey, you can make some profit off of this, and so for them to hit that price point, someone has to suffer along the line, right? And
Right.
who tends to suffer? The producer, as we all know.
Wow. Yeah, this is not an argument that's going to go away, and there's not an easy solution because I mean it'd be easier if the labeling, you know, like I said, it's going to take an act of Congress
Mm-hmm.
to get that to get the TTB to even look at that. And as we all know, all the government agencies are understaffed, overworked, and underpaid.
Yes.
So you know, and even if there's a suggestion to reword,
Sure.
it takes a year. You know, you put out the notice so that people can reread what it is and make suggestions, and a year later, you know, then they make a decision what they would, you know, what the labeling was going to say, and they don't just take care of the agave spirits industry, they take care of all the other industries at the same time when they rework the guidelines, the rule book, basically.
Sure.
So you know, there's a space in between where somebody's going to have to work together because, like you said, and the industry itself has been in its infancy for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, you know, it's been as you said, disorganized for quite some time. Probably more so than the mezcal industry. The mezcal industry for a little bit had its thing together, and then that all imploded in the last couple of years, right before the pandemic too.
Right.
And what how did the pandemic treat you guys? Because that must have been crazy too.
So it's you know it's part of the story that we like to tell. We launched formally in January 2020, the worst possible month to launch a spirit that no
Right.
one's ever heard of, or very few people have ever heard of. And then essentially all restaurants and bars close around the world as our world economy begins to essentially collapse, right?
Yeah. Right.
Because of COVID. So it was really interesting, and because we paid Jacobo, our master Sotolero at that
Uh-huh.
time, we didn't feel like he needed to share the pain with us because he had already produced the product. So we literally paid him February 28th,
Oh
and
my
then
God. And
March
yeah,
1st.
March 1st, everything shut down. Oh my God.
So we were sitting on 500 liters of Sotol just here at the house. Like, what are we going to do with all this
Oh
product?
my God.
So we did a lot of direct to consumer, which is legal in Mexico. It's not legal in the United States,
Right.
but in Mexico it's legal. So we did a lot of outreach and out to direct to consumer sales, and that's how we were able to offload a lot of that product. Because yes, it's super romantic. I love Sotol. I mean, it's part of who I am, my DNA. But at the end of the day, it does have to be a business. Otherwise, it's a very expensive hobby, right?
Right.
And
You had
I
all
think
those
as
liters of Sotol not making any money for you. Yeah.
and sometimes consumers, I think, criticize as you scale up and you start to industrialize on your end as well to satisfy your obviously your market. I think a lot of the romanticism for them in their mind starts to go away. But for us, we wanted to make sure that we instead of people hand axing the product like it's been done for many years, and it's really tough job on their bodies, their backs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we wanted to make sure that we brought in like a desgarradora, like an industrial
Right. It's a shredder.
a shredder,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that we could save that step and continue to invest in our brand, so that we could give it back to the producer, and therefore we could all share in the profits. So in that sense, 2020 was challenging, but we were able to do a lot of direct to consumer sales. And I mean, we're still very small batch. I mean, obviously, if you're looking through it through the tequila lens, 1,000 liters, 2,000 liters, 5,000 liters is what they make in an hour,
Yeah.
at least at the big distilleries. So we're very small, and in that sense, we're able to shift our strategies fairly quickly instead of a very large company, right, with a huge payroll and huge inventory costs.
So before I let you go, I know I've had you here longer than an hour, and you've been very patient. You waited
Salud.
even longer than that. Where do you see the industry going in 5 years? And maybe not even the industry. Where do you see Casa Medanos going, in 5 years?
So we want to, the strategy is we want to double our production every single year. So we started with 1,000 liters in 2020. So we were able to scale up to 2,000 and so forth and so forth. But we don't want the market forces to force us to cut corners and put out quality products that we think our consumers continue to enjoy. So essentially, we want to scale at an organic pace, not bring in crazy rounds of investors where they're like, well, I need a 25% return on my investment immediately. Thankfully, we have other revenue sources that we have, and we don't have that pressure that a lot of small batch producers have. So we want to continue to be small batch and still continue to be kind of a premium product, focused on as much evangelization as we can, talking to consumers. And we want to make sure that we're part of this new era of Sotoleros that view the industry as a unit. So there's no point in me bashing other Sotoleros because the competition is outside. It's not it's not within the Sotol industry. So
Right.
my hope is that the council becomes much more organized and we hear other voices, women, other from other states of the DO, and that we work together. Is my hope. Is it challenging? Sure. The egos tend to get in the way a lot of the times, but that's my hope, that we become a very strong council so that we can fight that battle that you're talking about, to make sure that we defend our DO. Because tequila can we like to value the fact that they fight their DO and they protect it, and we all value that, and mezcal as well. Why can't we as Sotoleros do it, right? Raicilla does it, Bacanora does it, Bosch does it, Charanda does it. So we feel like it's unfair for other Mexican spirits to ask Sotoleros to negotiate in that sense and say like, okay, you can produce it in the United States, and you guys just have to adapt to what's happening.
Yeah, it's really a loaded question. You know, it's not an easy. It's not an easy solution.
There isn't.
And like I said, unless the TTB, by some miracle, reworks that agreement, you know, where it was going to be initially, or you know, originally, you know, then you get that. To me was really unfair. I don't know what would cause that not including Sotol in that reworking of the labeling situation. That just it doesn't make any sense to me. But then again, I'm not a politician, so you know that's above my pay grade. It's more than they pay me for. So what the hell? I gotta tell you, Isaac, this has been eye-opening for me. I did not know some of the things that you brought up. I really got to spend more time out there, you know, just getting a feel for it, because I am in love with the Sotol, the spirit itself. And to be fair, I've not had what they make in Texas. I've only had one from a particular distiller who you may communicate with him every once in a while, who I feel had taken a lot of care in doing it the right way. And the only difference is he lives in Texas. You know, that's where it is. But even he was afraid of what was going on in Driftwood, and what, you know, who these guys are. But that's a whole other show. It's a whole other can of worms. But I so appreciate the time you've given us. I if somebody wants to get a bottle, can they get some online from is there a website where they can do that?
Sure, www.casamedanos.com, and then depending on what part of the country in the United States they are, just DM us on Instagram. We tend to be as fairly, you know, pretty quick, and we'll find a way to get a distributor. And then obviously we can't sell direct to consumer, but we'll find a distributor and make sure that they get it.
Okay, well, there you go, folks. I'm Mike Morales here in Southern California. You've been listening and watching, hopefully, our open bar interview with Isaac Montes of Casa Medanos Sotol. Beautiful spirit, folks. If you have not had Sotol, if you want to give it a shot, give it a try, this is probably a really great entry level Sotol with a lot of character. If you want to know what the buzz is, what's going around as far as the controversy or what it's all about, you know, who's involved, which celebrity got himself involved in it and why, you know, I say try it. If you, especially for those of you who are watching us in the Southwest, if you're watching us in New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, parts of Texas, Colorado, there's a lot of fans of Sotol in Colorado as well. Give it a try. Look for it, casamedanos.com, or check them out. There you go. That's the label I love. That silver label. That's awesome. And there's a good thing I put mine away, because I would be joining you. I would probably be halfway through my bottle at this point, and it's still early for me. But thank you, Isaac. I so appreciate the time, and I know I kept you too long. But anyway, folks, you've been watching, listening to Open Bar here on all of our channels and networks. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell if you're watching us on Instagram. Give us a like too, and share it. And whatever you do, tomar sabiamente, sip wisely.
Salud. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. All right. Let me do this. Hang on. Assign.
Sure.
Assign it. Let me call you right back. Can I do that? Just for 2 minutes, okay? I'll call you right back on Skype.
You got it.